We are going to record this session. We're trying to do a good job of capturing your feedback so that we can utilize that to incorporate into the grant proposals that we're going to be developing. So you are being recorded. So just so you know, with whatever thoughts you'd like to share with us, they will be in the permanent record. And we've got a great lineup for you today. So we're going to start out with a policy overview. So Pacific Policy Group, Mark and Tasha are going to provide that for us and go into the three for us. Good alliteration in this agenda, courtesy of Tasha. So we've got a budget update for you. We want to go over the bonds that are, and then also some key bills that CCLT is going to be both watching, interacting with, and seeking your input on. Then we're going to go into a California Onward update. So we have some really exciting announcements to share, and Brad Paymar is with us from the Land. So he and myself will be giving you an update on where we're at in partnership and the direction we're heading, and a few fun announcements for you. And then we're going to roll into the block grant proposals that we are working on, and I look forward to sharing about those opportunities with you and also receiving your feedback and on what the needs are of the land trust community and how we can best form up a program and grant applications that can serve your organizations. So welcome. We'd love to see your smiling faces on the video. So if you have the capacity to share your videos, please do so. And if folks can keep themselves muted, so we just don't have a lot of background noise, we would appreciate that very much. And Jessica Little is also going to be presenting with us. She is providing consulting services to CCLT on the development of our block grant applications and programs. So looking forward to incorporating Jess into the fun later on in the meeting. So, all right, well, welcome, and we'll go ahead and kick it off with Tasha and Mark, and I'll hand it over to you.
Okay, 1 second, I'm gonna share screen and do a PowerPoint. 1 second, I just want to get this on a different view. Oops, sorry about that, just 1 sec. For some reason, I'm not finding the right view for the PowerPoint. There we go.
You got it? Okay.
Yep, sorry about that.
No worries. Thanks, Tasha.
Okay. So, welcome everyone. Thanks for joining us. Mark and I are just going to do a quick legislative update given, certain time constraints. We want to give you a little bit of background in terms of what's been going on in the legislature so far and talk a little bit about state budget, bonds, and we picked just a couple bills to walk through with you guys given the time constraints that we have. So I will call upon Mark to start with the legislative background piece of our discussion today.
Will you go to the next slide?
Yeah.
Yeah, so here's the topics we're going to cover, as Tasha would mention, and then if you'll just skip ahead one more.
There you go.
All right, so we're here in mid-March. The session is a couple months underway. Seems like it's really been going on for a while, but we're really still just mostly at the beginning of the process. We are in a new 2-year legislative cycle. And one of the biggest factors for this session is that we have a lot of new legislators, about 25% turnover in both houses. So just a lot of new faces to be getting used to and trying to learn who these members are, what they're about, who their staff are. There's a lot of new staff that have come into the building as well. It's created new dynamics on all the different committees that the bills we work on make their way through. We have new committee chairs and members on the budget subcommittees that we pay attention to. It's very long-standing champions of our work are no longer sitting in the key positions like they once were. But obviously those create new opportunities and opportunity to create new champions. One of the factors that led to all these new legislators is that redistricting took place. And so not only are we trying to learn the new members themselves, but also understand which areas they're actually covering. And in some cases in the Senate, where they have their elections every 4 years, they have not actually shifted their districts yet into the new lines. So there's still some unknown areas as to who's covering what areas with some Senate seats. Adding to the uncertainty, and the new members certainly play a factor here, is impending changes to the leadership in both the Assembly and the Senate. We saw this start mid last year in May, where Assemblymember Robert Rivas from the San Benito area came and said he had the votes to become the new speaker and replace Anthony Rendon, who's been the speaker for 7 years now. For some reason, a vote was not pursued, and we had a lot of uncertainty for several months, and then in a caucus in November, and then certified at a vote in December. There was an agreement that Mr. Rivas would step in on July 1st. We've already seen one challenge as another Assembly member step forward, saying that he had the votes to be the new speaker. That certainly didn't happen. Expect for more uncertainty and turmoil to continue forward in this space. And the reason why it's so important is that whenever we have a new speaker step in, it's just going to really change the political dynamics and the power structure within the caucus and the Assembly. Committee chairs will change, important posts within the leadership will change. And as we talk through bonds, really understanding what are the priorities for those new leaders in the caucus as it relates both to what's in the resilience bond, as well as what it means their position on other bonds that are moving forward is going to be really, really relevant as we work through that process. The Senate has been quiet, but they are also facing a leadership change at some point as Pro Tem Tony Atkins does term out next year. So at some point we'll see a new Pro Tem, and that will also have impacts on how all the bills and the bonds move and the budget moves forward. This next bullet, at least in terms of how everyone around here is viewing it, COVID is over, and the Capitol is open for business. I was just in there not too long ago. It's mostly back to pre-pandemic normal meetings in person with legislators, with staff. The staff are in every day. Committee hearings are in person, although there are still call-in options for at least the committees I've seen so far. There's been some speculation that certain committees will take away the phone option. I have not quite seen that yet. But again, as far as the day-to-day business, for the most part, COVID is over. And then the last bullet on here, and we'll certainly get into more details on this, which is that the budget has taken quite a downturn after 2 years of incredible surplus and spending and spending plans like we've never seen. Revenues are now down quite a bit. And so the state and the legislature are adjusting to a new budget reality. So Tosh, I think you were going to talk about the budget a little bit.
Yeah, I'm going to talk about the budget, and then Mark's going to weigh in if I miss something or forget something. So we'll just kind of tag team this presentation. But as mentioned, I think most people have seen the news and know that we're going into a little bit of a budget decline. It was projected earlier that it was going to be in the 20-something billion in terms of a decline in revenue, and now it's the projection is going up, that it's going to be even more than first anticipated. But when the governor released his budget in January, we did see some proposed cuts across the board for natural resources funding. As many of you are aware, over the past, couple budgets previous, there had been some pretty big investments in natural resources budgets. We saw a huge bump at the Wildlife Conservation Board, for example, and the state conservancies, and a very large bump for Coastal Conservancy. And all of that was kind of in the lens of climate resilience and helping to achieve the governor's executive order on 30 by 30. And so we're super excited to see all those great general fund investments. But as many of you may or may not know, general fund dollars can be fleeting. And so when we see a downturn in state revenues, that also means that our funding could be a little bit in jeopardy. Good news is that, we did see probably a 10 to 20% cut across some of the natural resources programs, which is not terrible. And in fact, Wildlife Conservation Board did fairly well in the governor's proposed budgets, where we didn't see a ton of cuts. We saw a few, but not as much as could have happened. So I just wanted to note that, as of Wildlife Conservation Board's last board meeting, they still are showing a balance of $485 million in general fund dollars and an additional $185 million from previous bonds and things like the Habitat Conservation Fund. And this takes into account also their projects that are under development, meaning they have in their queue about $200 million worth of projects. So once you account for that, the 485 and the 185 are what are still remaining at Wildlife Conservation Board. Coastal Conservancy did see the most drastic cuts in the state budget at about 45% of a reduction in what they had been allocated or promised in the previous 2 years' budgets. But they are still having, a significant balance of funds. It looks like it's at about $582 million for climate resilience and sea level rise. So sea level rise is going to be different than the climate resilience nature-based solutions funding, which will likely be split between those two areas. Another thing that, not as drastic, but we did see a proposed cut. Remember, these are all proposed cuts. The governor's budget in January is a proposal. So these are all proposed cuts. Department of Conservation, we worked really hard. CCLT sponsored, along with the Association for Resource Conservation Districts, an effort to get capacity funding at Department of Conservation for land trusts, RCDs, and others. We were successful in getting a $20 million allocation in last year's budget. The governor's proposed budget for this year would reduce that amount by $4 million, leaving $16 million for capacity grants. And I just wanted to note that on behalf of CCLT, we will be working to advocate that none of these natural resources cuts happen. And so during the budget negotiation process, we have an opportunity to weigh in and hopefully be heard that we don't want to see any of these cuts happen, especially if the state is trying to achieve the goals of 30 by 30 and some of the other programs and initiatives that they're trying to make happen. So I wanted to let you guys know a little bit about the process that we're going to be going through with regard to the budget, which is, the governor releases his budget proposal in January, which we've already seen. And then during the next few months, the legislature will be responding to that proposal through various hearings and internal meetings and negotiations. And then in May, the governor will release his May revised proposal, which will take into account, we're supposed to take into account like the revenues that have come in from taxes and so forth. And Rico pointed out that we should probably note that because of all of the severe weather and the emergency proclamations, the deadline for tax returns has been pushed out quite a bit. And I think now they might even be the state might be proposing to push that even out further. So it had been moved to May 15th rather than April 15th. And now I thought I saw something that said proposals would go to August. And I see Rico has his hand up to ask a question. Till October? Oh, sorry.
Oh, it's till October. That's to conform with what the feds did. But and I just had a meeting with WCB and John Donnelly said that they still have about 93% of what was promised in last year's trailer bill, as opposed to the 400 and I mean 45% for Coastal Conservancy is a big number, but it's especially a big number when you're talking about $481 million that have, you know, vaporized, you know, when we obviously are not prepared for coastal erosion and sea level rise. I just wanted to say for 30 seconds here that I think the governor's budget has cut, they cut urban greening, urban forestry, and the local park program that's been oversubscribed by $7 billion to zero. So to hear them say that their January budget cuts spared disadvantaged communities under the, you know, the fact that those programs were cut to nothing when we're not prepared for extreme heat either. You know, it's almost as though these long-term transportation and zero emission vehicle goals are going to continue to be twice as much of the budget as natural resources to pursue a long-term goal while there is damage happening right now to species, habitat, and human beings, including, you know, mortality. So, you know, I don't know if they think that it's just collateral damage, but to me, to your point, Tasha, we cannot only not cut these programs, but we need to restore the ones that were cut to nothing. Because if we're not protecting what we have right now, who cares how many charging stations we have in 2050? You know, really. So I'll stop there.
Well,
Sorry.
no, I mean, there is a lot of work to be done. And unfortunately, you know, natural resources is one of the things that's on the chopping block every time we're in a situation like this. So, you know, obviously, you know, Mark and I are representing CCLT on this call. So, you know, we will be doing what we can across the board to try and help protect natural resources funding in the budget. So thanks for that. So given what Rico just said, I mean, pushing the deadline out for tax returns just makes our budget more precarious in the fact that we don't know what the revenues are actually going to be. And a lot of the budget will be, you know, natural resources and other things will hinge upon how much, you know, revenues the state takes in. So anyway, so just going through this again, the budget is kind of a lengthy process, but it all kind of needs to wrap up by June when the deadline to submit a budget proposal to the governor is. And then, you know, we need to have a budget in place to be enacted by July of this year. So there's going to be a lot of work, a lot of outreach and education and trying to make sure that we protect our natural resources funding. Given the fact that there will be some budget cut, Mark, did you want to?
Yeah, just really quick, Tosh.
Sure.
In regards to that sort of June deadline, I mean, that is the constitutional deadline for the legislature to pass a budget, and they have the fiscal year that starts July 1st. But what we've seen in the last couple of years and would expect to see again is that the June budget ends up being about 2/3 of the actual overall budget proposal, and a lot of the controversial items are held over until the end of session. And wouldn't surprise us if some of these items we're talking about are part of that later on in the year package. So it gets kind of challenging to understand and assess where items are at in terms of priority and viability to move forward. But I think what we know is we're going to be working really hard with that June timeline, and then if things carry on, we'll have to keep working ourselves and also asking you for help.
Thanks, Mark. Yeah, so in light of the proposed budget cuts, the governor and his administration have signaled that they would be open to natural resources bond to backfill some of those proposed cuts. So that's great to hear support for that. But again, we're going now back to the bond model. Not that, we didn't get away from it for very long, but in response to that, or even, maybe if the governor hadn't said anything about being supportive of a bond, we have seen bonds introduced this year. So Eduardo Garcia, who is, over the years been kind of leading the charge on natural resources bonds, introduced AB 1567 this year, which is a $15 billion natural resources proposal. And it's basically double what he had proposed last year, which was around $7 billion. And what he's done is taken his earlier version and then increased each of the areas by approximately double the amount that had been originally proposed. So we're seeing investments in his natural resources bond and like fire prevention, forest health, coastal resilience and adaptation, a variety of different water programs, biodiversity, which would be the majority of the 30 by 30 type of thing, ag, extreme heat, and then regional resilience. So, early stages in bond discussions, SB 867 was introduced in the Senate, and the amount as of right now is unspecified, and even most of the detail is not there yet. But during our discussions with legislative staff working on the bond, they said they expect it to be between 10 and 15 billion as well. And there are the similar funding categories to AB 1567. And what we, through the bond process, what we've learned over time and, negotiating with the legislature is that, it's kind of like a hurry up and wait and a hurry up and wait kind of process there, where we provide feedback and then things start to move and then they'll be stalled for a while. But again, this is early in the process for a bond, and we have been talking with both Garcia's office and the Senate on the proposals. One thing I wanted to mention with regard to bonds, people get excited about a natural resources bond and want to be engaged, but in addition to the natural resources bonds that have been introduced, the legislature has also introduced an ag bond, flood bonds, housing, and school bonds this year. So we're seeing a pretty crowded field in terms of all the different bonds that are being proposed. And at this point in time, we don't know what the appetite will be for all of these bonds or a select few. It's just, there's a lot going on in the world of bonds right now. We're also seeing that, I think folks are coming out with the big number right now, 15 billion for a natural resources bond. And that might not be what the governor has in mind. I mean, if there's a $4 billion cut to natural resources, maybe they're thinking a $4 billion bond is the right way to go. So the size of the bond could vary over time. We just don't know. And, as we know, we could use that full 15 billion if that's an actual viable proposal. And then another thing we don't know is the timing for the bond. So some folks have said that they'd like to see a bond on the March primary ballot, that it might have a better chance. But politics as they are, it could take a while to get a bond proposal ready. And, we're probably looking at a November bond if we do get a bond passed. So again, on behalf of CCLT, we will be working through all these bond negotiations and the bond process and keeping everyone informed as we move forward. I think at some point in time, we will want to hear from the various members as to what they, what you guys want to see in a bond, and, if there's things missing or things that, you want to see bigger in these proposals, like amounts and that sort of thing. So we will keep working on that front as well as the budget front, because we need more than what the budget could probably provide and what a bond could provide. So we just, keep working on the funding side of things as we go forward.
Yeah, Tosh, before we move on to the bills, I just one comment around getting feedback to CCLT, how we're going to engage. I know when we talked last week, one thought is that we would really like for CCLT to have a really strong understanding of what all of you would like to see in the bond and what you would like to see CCLT be advocating for. So to the extent you're comfortable with, as you've done your reviews of AB 1567, when SB 867, the proposal actually goes into print, where you're seeing pots or programs that are underfunded or missing or just right, we'd really welcome that feedback so that we can make a concentrated effort as CCLT representing you all in this bond effort. So Bridget, Kim, I think we talked about last week, maybe putting an email out, trying to gather that feedback so that we can move forward with that type of activity.
Yeah, I'll just pipe in here for a second. So if you all have, particular things that you would like, to see advocacy around, please do share that with us. You're welcome to send us emails directly to CCLT's email account. I'll pop that in the chat here. Or, if Mark and Tasha or myself or other board members, please feel free to reach out to us and contact us to share, your read on those bonds and the particular areas that you're concerned about, or, as Mark shared, you'd like to see greater allocation or less allocation. That sounded like a Goldilocks analogy that you said, Mark, or just right. So do, please reach out to us and share your perspectives. And yes, we will send out an email communication also calling for feedback as well.
Can I just have to say that bonds are not a panacea. They're uncertain. Who knows if the voters will pass it? And it just, that money will be three years out from now before it's actually programmed and on the ground and awards are being made. So it's not money that we can access immediately. And I don't want an advocacy for a bond to overwhelm advocacy for keeping surplus money in that can go out the door right away.
Yeah, really well said, Rico. I mean, I think as we've been talking internally, it's a both, right? It's a protect the surplus and ask for a bond. I mean, I think, if the budget situation were closer to just being neutral, we'd be asking for a bond. We know it's needed. We can't give up on the budget money, on the surplus money, but we also know that, you got to get working on the bond now. Because once it starts to get cooking, it's hard to make bigger changes. And that was going to be my last comment around the bonds, just a little bit on timing. The Garcia bond, as Tasha laid out, it's got its framework to start with, but they are on a pretty quick turnaround from what they've explained so far in terms of making their own amendments and allocating out that additional $7-8 billion. Mr. Allen's proposal will come into print sometime in the next 2 weeks. They've got a committee hearing on the 28th. And then it'll be, maybe 1 or 2 shots at amendments based on that framework. I think the biggest X factor here is going to be the administration, though. They're clearly looking at what's happening in the budget process to dictate how they engage in the bond conversation. I mean, Wade said as much in budget subcommittee a couple of weeks back that they're not going to propose any language. They're not going to engage with the authors until May revise at the earliest. And I think given the intel that we've picked up, particularly from the Senate, that they're looking at this as a next year item, we may not see the administration really engage until next year.
Well,
And,
the other wild card, Mark, is that by the time this comes up for a vote, and let me remind everybody, this is a 2/3 vote in the legislature. There's going to be leadership change going on in both houses, and who the hell knows what that's going to do to getting your ducks in a row and your I just want to throw that out there as yet another complication. You identified, I think, the number one.
I wonder why we had that bullet earlier on in our slides, Rico. You hit it right on the head. I mean, trying to figure out where particularly the Assembly's priorities are right now is kind of a fool's errand. So
yeah,
timing is kind of all over the place. But as I said, I mean, we need to engage early on, because once it starts to really get moving, it gains its own momentum. All right. I will move on to the bills that we're looking at. So the first one, AB 338 by Assemblymember Aguilar Curry. This is a bill that was moved last session, got all the way to the governor's desk, and was then vetoed. So she is bringing it back once again. As you can see here, it would define certain fuels reduction forestry projects as public works and then make them subject to prevailing wage. The governor's veto last year said something to the effect of there's already enough red tape when it comes to these types of projects. I don't want to slow them down, but bring me a bill that kind of works out the kinks, and we'd be happy to engage in that process. So it's back. It's the same version as where it left off last year. When we talked with the CCLT team last week, we felt like we'd probably start out just watching this bill for the most part, but doing it very actively, but also open to your feedback in terms of how you think this is going to impact your land trust and your implementation of projects. There is policy provision that says for nonprofits, you get a 2-year window from when this takes effect to when you would have to start implementing it. So if it were to pass this year, it would take effect January 1st, 2024. You would then be subject to it on January 1st, 2026. This is being pursued by a number of different labor organizations. It's sponsored by the operating engineers. I think one of the big differences between last year and this year is that at this time last session, there was no opposition to the bill, registered opposition, that is, and a lot of the political community up here wasn't really engaging. There are a number of groups that I've been in contact with that are either going to be officially opposed or expressing concerns. So I think it's going to be a slightly different effort this go round, but we're still trying to really get sorted as to how or if CCLT engages on this bill. But certainly it's one we know we need to keep a close eye on, and again, would welcome your input and feedback. The next bill, SB 336 by Mr. Umberg, also a bill coming back from last year. It would create a mechanism for nonprofits to put in place a negotiated indirect cost rate for all grants going forward. So if the bill were to pass, takes effect January 1st, any grant that was then entered into after, you could negotiate with the implementing department on an indirect cost rate. Part of the bill says that if you have an indirect cost rate with the federal government, you could use that. If not, you can work through a process with the administration to land on an indirect cost rate unique to you. Tasha, I know you've had a little bit of contact with the author's office. Anything to add?
No, not at this point.
And remind me, did CCLT support this bill last year?
I can't remember if CCLT supported or did a support if amended. One of the issues is that other organizations are not eligible, like resource conservation districts. And I know that there was one effort to try and amend it to include RCDs. And so I just can't remember if we did a direct support or a support if amended.
Yeah, we'll certainly want to support this. I recall last year, one of the issues too was they were looking at only new programs versus new grants. So that's a bit of a change. That's certainly a positive.
Right, so this would affect all grants made after a certain date. And I believe it's 2024.
And I'm seeing Doug's question in the chat. Yes, that's correct, Doug. You would negotiate that indirect rate, and then that's for your grants going forward, you would receive that. So big deal. The next bill or bills are also coming back from last year. AB 9 by Mr. Murtsuchi, SB 12 by Mr. Stern. There was a proposal last year that would increase the state's 2030 GHG emission reduction goals. Currently, they're at 40% below 1990 levels. This proposal moves it to 55%. Last year, this came about at the end of session, and CCLT, we felt strongly that climate mitigation policy proposals such as this benefit all of our work and something that we should get behind and planning to support once again now that they're back. It's certainly going to be a tough lift. This was the only bill out of the climate package at the end of last session to not get across the finish line. Industries, as you can imagine, the emitting industries are not too big of fans of this one because it's just going to ratchet down on them harder in terms of the immediate transitions they're going to have to make to different technologies, different practices. But when it comes to protecting our biodiversity, if we can make changes now, that's only going to be more beneficial. And then the last bill I wanted to mention, for those of you involved in implementation of CAL FIRE grants, particularly on forest health and wildfire prevention, if you've been working at all through a regional process, whether it's the Regional Forest and Fire Capacity Program, or I know there's other regional constructs out there, like if you're in Mid-Sierra, there's the Central Sierra Tahoe Initiative. The idea is that CAL FIRE would start providing block grants to these regional entities to start implementing those plans and really increase the pace and scale at which projects are funded so that we can increase the pace and scale at which they are implemented. So I wanted to highlight that one for this group. And I think that was the last slide we have.
Yes. This is the official last slide, though. So yeah, I can stop sharing. But we will take any questions if folks have questions regarding any of the things we just talked about.
Okay, and we would like to hear from you. So again, please reach out. I know that there's folks working in the Sierra on, particular policy issues. So, Sierra Cascade Land Trust Council, Sierra Consortium, love to have dialogue with you all about your upcoming policy priorities, and Catherine and folks at Solano Land Trust that are working with the Ag Land Trust. Same to you. Love to hear if there's particular areas that you're concerned about, feedback on the bonds, all of that. So please do get in touch with us, and we want to try to elevate the voice of the whole land trust community. So we invite you to help us do that. Okay. All right, any final questions or comments for Mark and Tasha? All right, well, hot off the press, we have some breaking news from Kay, who serves on the board. She's our vice chair, and she has been working on one of the issues that has been identified by this community around the mapping procedure process and ranking system that is being employed by the state for defining conserved lands in 30 by 30. So Kay, tell us about your good work.
Or the good news. Thank you so much. I'm going to first read a quote that's going to be in our e-newsletter here, and just that's going to be going out, in the next week. And this is by Dr. Jennifer Norris, Deputy Director, lead on 30 by 30. We know folks are still uncertain about which conservation easements count. Good news, most of them do. We just need to clean up our data. Work with Green Info Network will help us capture the array of easement types and build a toolkit to get your easements into our system. Please help. So it's a clear call out to land trusts to help get our correct data to Green Info to get the mapping updated and show correct information. The exciting part of that, well, that's pretty darn exciting, but in addition to that, Green Info is going to be under CCLT will be hosting a series of workshops, most likely starting in April, where Green Info is going to walk us through some of the issues they're having, how we can help. And then at the same time they're pulling this information in, they're going to be building a toolkit that will come out to us that will help us get accurate information up. The maps will be accurate, will be showing our correct conserved areas. So I feel like this was a big breakthrough. There's been a lot of frustration building on when are we going to get a tool, when are we going to be able to supply updated information. The state has recently contracted with Green Info Network, and they're on board to get this cleaned up. So stay tuned for more information. There'll be something about it in the next e-news. We might even have the dates of the workshops, but right now it's looking like early April for these workshops. So please join us and stay tuned. Rico.
Thank you. I'm sure everybody knows this, but John Donnelly, of old friend to most of us, I'm sure, at WCB, is retiring in a week or week and a half or something like that. And they are going to have a celebration in May for him. So I just want to make sure everybody knows that. And if you're want to get emails to be apprised of where the location and time of the honoring event, I'm sure he's going to be lavished with, I mean, the guy's been there for 40 years in one way or another. So I wouldn't, I'm sure Wade will be there. It should, but anyways, Mary Ahern at WCB is kind of managing that. So if you need her email, you can, or if you're, contact her if you have it already. If you want her email, let me know.
Yeah, the event is supposed to take place after the May board meeting.
Yeah, it's on the 25th.
Okay, great. Thank you, Rico. All right. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and move us into our next agenda item. So we're excited to give you all an update on California Onward, which is the initiative that CCLT and the Land Trust Alliance have been working on together to advance our work collectively in California. And as you all know, CCLT has been going through a kind of next evolution of our organization. A couple years ago, we did a strategic planning process and have been evaluating the business model of the organization, how we're serving member needs and advancing conservation in California, and looking at a new model for how we move forward. And that includes bringing LTA to California to partner with us and to bring all of the wonderful work that they do across the nation in a more focused way to California. So we've been raising funds and advocating for resources for this partnership for several years now. And thanks to the very dedicated effort of our board members, we've been able to raise funding, both private funding and some public funding to support this effort. And we're excited to share that we're going to be hiring a program director through CCLT with the funding that we have recruited. And we're going to be able to fund a position with LTA as well. So you will be seeing an announcement from CCLT for the hire of this position. And, you know, many of you that are on the call could be potential candidates for that position. So we'd like you to look at it and also help us spread the word as we bring in this really key position that is going to be able to do a lot of great work across our state, serving all the land trusts of California. And I'm going to turn it over to Brad to share a little bit more context from LTA and share your thoughts, Brad. So take her away.
Bridget, yeah, hi everyone, I'm Brad Paymar, I'm the Western Division Director for the Land Trust Alliance. I've met many of you over the years and hope you're all staying safe in this insane weather you're having. I'm part of our field services program at the Land Trust Alliance, and you may be aware that there's folks like me that are located all around the country, and we're working hand in hand with land trusts to help build capacity. And as Bridget said, it's been great over the last 2 years. We've been talking with CCLT about how we can build our presence in California. Historically, we've had staff people working there, but they've also served a bunch of other states, the Southwest, all the way over to Texas and Kansas. So it's been a big job. And many of you knew Shannon Meyer before and Amanda Hill, they served in that role. But now we're, half the land trusts in the West are actually in California. And to help increase our focus there, we're going to be also hiring a staff position at the Land Trust Alliance, a program manager. And I was hoping it would be posted by today. It was part of my big unveil, but it's not quite up yet. I'm thinking maybe tomorrow or the next day. So I'll at least post a link in the chat here to our job board, and keep an eye on that, and please help spread the word. So this is going to be a person that's going to be partnering with CCLT and helping to work on some of the state funding opportunities, and also building a broader capacity building program in California. So so if you know anyone that might be a good fit, please, like I said, help spread the word. I'm happy to answer any questions too.
Okay, thanks, Brad. Any questions for Brad or our team here at CCLT at this point? All right, great. Okay, so now we are going to roll into the Block Grant funding opportunity that we are moving forward on at CCLT and bringing LTA in to work on as well. And I'm going to introduce Jess Little. So you may be familiar with her. She's been working in conservation for many years, has worked for several different organizations, and now has her own consulting firm. And Jess has been helping us develop this opportunity. So I'll turn it over to you, Jessica.
Hi, everybody. I'm really excited to be here, and I love working at the transition from state budget advocacy and bond advocacy into bringing the money down to the ground to your project. So that I'm really glad to work on this with the team, who is also made up of Bridget, Kim Colpin, Tasha, and Brad from the Land Trust Alliance. And I'm going to fumble to share my screen. Just hang with me 1 second, okay? Okay. Is it this button to see the full screen? Does that look normal or not normal?
Well, we can see there you go. You got it.
Okay. Okay, awesome. And also, I just have to tell you, it's dinner time. There's like a herd of wild elephants running around the house. So forgive the extra chaos that I didn't intend to bring with me, but nevertheless is always around. Okay, so this block grant program, you might be wondering what it is, what's guiding its development, how we're developing it, how it can benefit your land trust. So we're going to talk about a bunch of these things. This is really meant to be a discussion. We want you to help inform what this is, and there's a number of ways you can do that today in this conversation, and also through a survey that is going to be developed. So next slide. Just first, I want to say that we're really looking at the Block Grant program as an extension or an element of California Onward. So ultimately, it is envisioned to be something rather large or broad, but we're starting with like a bite-sized chunk to get up and running. Just quickly, the goal of the Block Grant program is really focused on two things. It's building capacity of the land trust community to implement the state's two most recent and large planning and policy documents or goals. That is the 30 by 30 program, and then the Natural and Working Lands Climate Smart Strategy, which from here on out, I will just call the Climate Smart Strategy. So we're really gearing everything towards those because the land trust community has such a big role to play in implementation of both of those programs, and not just between us, but just between us. This is the work we've already all been doing for a long time. So we're focused on building capacity in this program and delivering technical assistance, both to help move us towards those goals. The program is envisioned to be administered by CCLT and the Land Trust Alliance in partnership. And one of the biggest benefits for all of you is that the process to get state funding through a block grant scenario is going to be much less onerous than filling out a grant application for $1 million each time that requires 120 pages of documentation. So that's some of the guardrails and like guiding principles around why we want to have a block grant program. And I'm going to go on to the next slide. So really, what is guiding the program? Many of you probably responded to a capacity needs or assessment survey in the last couple of years by CCLT that told us that the land trust community needs a whole bunch of things if we're really going to implement those two planning and policy documents, both the 30 by 30 and Climate Smart Strategy. So we heard the need, and now we're really working to bring funding to increase the capacity of your organizations there. The next set of guardrails around how we're aiming to develop this program is really around the planning and policy goals of those documents. And then more specifically, there's two funding opportunities right now that are going to put even more guardrails around the block grant program. So we're really responding to all of these things in a trio. And I will talk a little bit more about those. Anything else the others on the team want to add into this particular conversation? All right.
I think that's good, Jess. Thanks.
Okay. So backing up, a lot of us know what the Pathways to 30 by 30 report is and what the Natural and Working Lands Climate Smart Strategy is. But many of us are like, what do those documents even say? They're like 110 pages in some case and have a multitude of strategies in them that we can pull down pieces of. So the Pathways to 30 by 30 document is really focused on acquiring 30% of, not acquiring in our terms, but protecting 30% of the state's land and waters by 2030. How they measure that is evolving, as Kate talked about earlier. And there's 10 different pathways by which they want to achieve 30 by 30. But the main goals that we're focused on are the three goals they defined right at the front of the document, which are to protect and restore biodiversity, so keyword biodiversity, expand access to nature, and then mitigate and build resilience to climate change. So the thrust of all of the work in the block grant is going to be focused towards these 3 goals, and then what is outlined in the natural and working lands climate smart strategy. So the climate smart strategy is really focused on getting emissions reductions or carbon sequestration out of the natural and working lands sector. It was really created as a response to what word do I want to use here, but a need to like emphasize the ability of natural and working lands to sequester carbon. There's a whole lot of actions in that document. The key thing here right now is that there's lots of actions related to working lands and how working lands fit here. The challenge with the pathways to 30 by 30 until they potentially revise their data is that it really has limited the ability of working lands to count towards the land protection goals. So those are the early sort of guardrails that we are working with, or the first set, the widest, broadest. And then we have really 2 funding programs that are in front of us and very likely or very squarely fit the block grant program that we are working to build. I just want to highlight that this really is a great example of why general fund money is so important to retain in the state budget, because general fund money, different than the bond funds, is can be used for much broader purposes. Bond funds are pretty limited to capital projects. General fund can pay for capacity building and technical assistance. So both of these programs would be likely to use general fund money. So the general fund and budget case is made even stronger here. And hopefully that's a muscle we can, or something we can say as we flex our additional capacity muscles down the line. Okay. So the 2 funding programs that we're working with, we're really like moving from sort of the sky level down closer towards the grass and getting into the nuts and bolts of what we can fund. So CCLT and LTA are anticipated to go after funding through both of these programs in the very near future. And what would be an outcome of funding through these would be a block grant program that CCLT and LTA administer to land trusts. Ultimately, what we need to hear from land trusts is not just your general need, but your very specific needs that fit within these programs, which I will describe. Okay, so first we have the Department of Conservation's Climate Smart Land Management Program. I would say CCLT had a pretty strong hand in helping craft the program, advocate for the program. So really, it's directly aligned with what we're trying to do here. It is literally bringing advocacy down to the ground. There's funding, $8.5 million of funding available in this first opportunity. Grants right now are ranging, the suggested range is from 500,000 to 2 million. So there's an upper cap of 2 million. Excuse me. And there's lots of flexibility in how those funds can be used. So they've identified 5 areas that can be funded. They are building and sustaining capacity, technical assistance, natural and working lands climate smart strategy, strategic planning, project development and permitting, and then demonstration projects. So what are all those things? There's a whole lot of detail in the guidelines, but you'll see it's still pretty broad. I wonder if I can go and show you them in the guidelines just shortly, but I'll goof up the screen share if I do it now. But I just want to say that technical assistance is unique in that it's really focused on delivering technical assistance in a targeted way. So they're looking at things occurring in small group settings or in very specific sort of topical areas. I feel like building and sustaining capacity are fairly self-explanatory, and project development and permitting. The natural and working lands climate smart strategy strategic planning is sort of specific, and we can talk more about that as we move through the conversation. And then demonstration projects. So what projects maybe is our organization looking at doing that is innovative, or really moving us to showing sequestration results on land management. There's that program. It's really exciting. It's kind of one of a kind in terms of actual dedicated capacity building funding for our sector. The draft guidelines are out, and it's expected that we'll have a grant deadline of May 8th. What that means is CCLT will need to submit a grant by May 8th. And in that process, we'll need to understand very specifically your organization's first capacity need. More about that when we move to the survey. The other opportunity before us is with the Wildlife Conservation Board. You already all know likely that they're the state's sort of real estate arm for conservation. It's they have funded block grants, and they have funded capacity building to some degree, but I would say we're helping them move farther in that direction with this proposal. We've submitted a pre-proposal that broadly outlines what a block grant program could deliver for the land trust community. It's focused on implementation of 30 by 30. And we got some really strong feedback from WCB that they're really interested in metrics that help show to their board that projects are getting moved to shovel ready. So for example, we heard questions around how many appraisals are getting complete through the block grant. So some really distinct metrics around that. And then we also heard a really strong call from WCB to engage in some training on diversity, equity, inclusion, and how to build partnerships with California's Native American communities. We don't have as hard of a deadline on that grant because it's not a set competitive program like the DOC program, but we're targeting a late summer or fall deadline for that. I feel like I'm talking a lot, and I'll take a breath and see who else, Bridget, Tasha, Kim, or Brad wants to share or add to that.
You're doing a great job, Jess. This is I like your analogy, taking us from the 30,000 foot level down to the ground level.
To the grass.
Yeah, down to the grass.
Okay. Well, moving on. Okay, so speaking of moving up from the sky down to the ground, we are really looking at responding to the current funding opportunities because they're there, and we really need to demonstrate that the land trust community and CCLT and LTA, this new partnership, can move and do something. So we're excited about that. And we really need to understand your capacity needs, the needs of the communities that you serve, and then we really need to develop metrics that can convey ultimately to the legislature that the investments they made in these agencies for capacity building, which are new and uncomfortable potentially for the legislature, are worthy investments and help advance us to those really important goals that are outlined in 30 by 30 and the climate smart strategy. That is going to look like lots of questions to you and surveys. One thing we've seen other associations do is really build and flex a survey muscle, I should say. So starting off with asking questions and then having your organizations get ready to respond to them fairly regularly so we can keep pace with how your organizations are evolving and adapting to the need to meet the needs of or the goals in those policy documents. Rico, I see your hand, hang on. So we're really moving from the initial or responding to the RFPs that are out there right now to defining a full block grant program. So like the analogy of flying a plane as you build it is real and we are flying a plane. We have our buckles fastened. We're on for the ride, but we're ultimately aiming at building something much bigger than even those 2 grant programs allow. Yes, Rico, where are you?
I'm here. I fully support what you just said about block grants and potential that they have. I just want to emphasize something I put in the chat, which is, sequestration, 30 by 30 is about, just by definition, acreage, but it's also about species and sequestration and all those things. But from every indication I've gotten from people that have money, benefiting disadvantaged communities, make sure you can demonstrate that in your applications, and especially around access. John Donnelly made a point to saying that's what they want to do. They feel like they haven't done enough in that area, and they have more money than anybody, at least for the time being. So I know that there are opportunities to do that where everybody works. So I just want to put that out there.
Well, thank you, Rico. I feel like you hit it right on the head. You'll see in the survey as it rolls out and you respond to it, Rico, that there are going to be questions about that. And we definitely heard from WCB directly that there is a strong desire to have that as part of the proposal. And that is also part of how the Department of Conservation's funding program is set up as well. Okay. Well, hey, look at that. Before we talk a little bit about the survey that you're going to see here soon, I just want to make space for discussion and questions about the proposed program. Because it's new, I expect that you should have some questions or input. So if you do, you can raise your hand, and I think I can see hands up here. Or Bridget, is there anything else you want to add to all of this? Or Brad?
Yeah, no, I think that was great. And the, again, solid analogies in the presentation, and, building the airplane while flying it, very true, moving at a rapid pace here. So John, you have a hand up.
I do. Thank you. John McCall with Sonoma Land Trust. Thanks, Jessica, Tasha, and Mark for all the background. I saw Jessica this past week in Sacramento and was mentioning that the Land Trust got a grant in 2018 through US EPA. And I was just pulling up, I'll put it in the chat, but it was their Healthy Watersheds program. And this is not a plug for us, but rather a plug for the kind of funding that I consider to be essential, which is, again, it was through US EPA, but they gave us a $100,000 grant for grant writing. So we were able to hire a full-time fundraiser who helped us with mostly state agency grants for acquisition projects, but also restoration. We had very clear metrics of how many acres we proposed we would get protected during the course of the grant, how much money we would raise, because we only picked projects that we were pretty confident we were going to be able to follow through on. But I think we had about a 3,000 acre target. We needed more than $3,000. A 3,000 acre target, and I forget the dollar figure, but it was in the millions. And we met the performance criteria, but that was the best $100,000 we ever got, because you can't get that money anywhere else. And we ended up hiring the grant writer on our own after that grant terminated, because she did such good work. So it built capacity in our organization to see how valuable that money was. So that's my plug for that. I have no idea if the state would be willing to go down that road. Just one other thing, because we're struggling with it, which is and I don't know how this fits in, but it's the long-term management stewardship costs. the agencies know our plight. They know it very well, but just funding acquisition and not having any capacity after acquisition for management is a challenge. We did get a recent grant through the Restoration Authority, the San Francisco Bay Restoration Authority, where Measure AA funding, where they actually funded a position for stewardship for a property that we're buying down in the San Pablo Baylands. So that was for staffing support. It was over a period of, I believe, 2 years. It wasn't infinite support for staff, but those are two areas where we just can't seem to easily find sources of funding.
Yeah, and that's, John, those are two great case studies for us to get our hands on. And exactly what you're talking about is what we're hoping to fund through these programs. So, initial funding for staffing capacity that then builds upon itself. And, we see that in organizations that get those infusions for, a couple of years, and then they're able to sustain it on an ongoing basis. And also that the issue around long-term stewardship funding, we are also exploring that at CCLT and how we can help advocate for or develop mechanisms where the state can do that on a more consistent basis. So your example from the San Francisco Authority would be great to learn about as well. And if anyone else has examples of any agencies funding investments in long-term stewardship, please send those our way as well.
Can I answer some chat questions? Catherine Ledan asks to clarify whether the Block Grant program is available for non-CCLT members. So yes, the Block Grant program is open to land trusts, both member and non-member land trusts. And then Kathleen, it looks like you're asking about if those deadlines in the slideshow are for CCLT or land trusts themselves. Those deadlines, at least the first one, the Department of Conservation, is a deadline for CCLT to submit a proposal. In just a minute, we're going to walk through the potential contents of a survey that you will have to respond to if you're interested in that first funding opportunity. And that deadline will actually be sooner, but hopefully it's way more simple than filling out a grant. That's the kind of feedback we actually need. We want to make this very user-friendly so that you will want to fill out a survey or Excel spreadsheet, tell us what you need, and then we can help you bring in funding for it. So we're looking for all types of feedback there. Any other questions? I want to walk through a little bit what's in the Climate Smart Lands Management Program eligible funding activities, because I think it gives more context to what you'll see in the survey. So I am going to open those guidelines back up and screen share with you. Just 1 second. Okay. So a little more context on what this program is, and I'm talking a lot about it because it's going to be the first thing you have to respond to us if you're interested in funding. Can you see this thing? Is it just me? So the funding available through this particular program is going to be available for 3 years. So you can think of building your capacity over 3 years. And they're looking at funding in 5 categories. 1, building and sustaining capacity. So investments in partner and staff development, compensation for program staff time, getting new tools in the door, resources that you need to do the work. This one is kind of interesting and new for us. So organizational activities to access financial services, legal review, to do due diligence, some limited purchases of equipment. So it's really broad. I would encourage you to review this closely. Technical assistance here is another category you'll see a survey question about. The umbrella for the program itself is really focused on delivering on the natural and working lands climate smart strategy. So technical assistance will be likely tied to what is in that strategy, but you can see how they suggest facilitating technical assistance sort of in small groups, really tailored to meeting the needs of land trusts to get to project implementation. Natural and working lands climate smart strategy, strategic planning would really be like looking at your organizations, identifying how you can plan for integrating some of these strategies into your work. And they're also really looking at how that planning is done. So is it done in our like broad stakeholder collaborative way? That's an important part of this piece. You can also look at prioritizing projects within where your organization is working. Project development and permitting. So permitting, I hear all the time, it's like one of the hardest things to, and the most expensive things to get done. It's an impediment to implementation all the time. So this might be a really interesting bucket of funding for your organization to look at. And then demonstration projects. Okay, so that's a little more context for that. And then I want to show you the survey. Let's see if it's this tab. Okay, so just confessing my awkwardness with Google Forms. It's not in a Google form because I don't know how to get it into a Google form yet. But we have the contents of what we would like to ask you. And I will also say that ultimately we want to know a much broader sort of snapshot or assessment of your organization needs or the community's needs broadly to support those two planning documents. But for this moment, we're really focused on this particular funding opportunity. So this is a survey to understand your organization's specific needs. We are asking you to pick your highest priority capacity need to get to one of the goals in the natural and working lands climate smart strategy. Why one? Because if you picked all of them, we would easily blow the $2 million cap on the program. So we're asking you to pick one. And we want to know more about the community that you're serving. So literally you'll see a question that says, where are you serving? What's your geography? Do you serve a disadvantaged community, a severely disadvantaged community? And those are defined in the guidelines by median household income. Then we're going to ask you more about technical assistance. So if you were to be a recipient of some of this funding or participate in this program, what would be the most helpful type of technical assistance? These questions I jotted down here are really focused on what is outlined in the climate smart strategy as sort of focuses of that. And so tell us what you need here. We're looking at partnership development and coordination broadly. That's not just with governments, but that's with community-based organizations, RCDs, maybe tribes, maybe looking at disadvantaged communities and how you can work more closely with organizations there. The other type of technical assistance we're probably going to ask you about is sort of the nuts and bolts of acquisition and climate smart land management strategies. So do you need help figuring out how to do appraisals, or does your staff need help with that? Site assessments, all that kind of stuff. And then are there techniques or stewardship consultation or technical assistance services that would be helpful to your organization? So this is a flavor of the technical assistance questions we will ask you. And to the other teammates on this, chime in if you have things you want to add here. Brad and Catherine, I think, is on the line as well as Tasha and Bridget and Kim. Okay, so then we are going straight into the, does your organization need funding in the following areas that are outlined and that we just covered in the Department of Conservation Program guidelines? We need you to pick one. We need you to tell us how much your request would be for. And then we need to know how you would make the case that this capacity is going to get you to one of the 30 by 30 or climate smart strategy goals, or closer to it. So we're helping make the case between the capacity building and the ultimate outcomes that are outlined in those policy documents. And then we want to know a little bit more about the type of work you're doing in terms of the priorities of the natural and working lands climate smart strategy and the areas identified in the climate smart strategy for work. That gives you a sense of the survey itself. We will share this with you. And let me stop share for a second so I can see you all. And then I would love to have time for questions and clarification on all of this. And I see a bunch of different things in the chat. Does anybody want to ask a question with their hand raised before I answer what's in the chat? Kelly? Hi.
Hi, thank you. I appreciate you seeing my real hand because I couldn't other hand. So as a precursor to our filling out the survey, can you give a little more info on like the approximate timeline for funding availability to the land trusts?
Absolutely. Great question. I should have just like texted you that question and had you ask it. So the elephants upstairs are loud, but Department of Conservation expects to start making awards by the end of the summer. And I would expect we could turn around block grants pretty quickly thereafter. So you can think of receiving funding sometime, at least the beginning of the early stages of funding, sometimes between July and September. So it could be pretty quick depending on if they actually make that date and then how fast we can turn around funding. Bridget or Brad, anything on that? No.
I think it would depend on what the program design ends up looking like as far as the timing goes.
Did that help, Kelly?
Yes, thank you.
Okay.
And yeah, I said, I'm just gonna respond to the cash flow advance stuff. I think, there could be a possibility to get some advance funding, but typically DOC is with other state agencies do this on a reimbursement, way of doing their grants. But I know that with DOC, they've been really trying hard to make sure that the funding moves out very quickly. So it's not like with some state agencies where you're waiting 6 months to get paid. These guys try to pay their invoices within like 30 days. So they're very quick on trying to turn around the cash. They know that folks need the money.
Yes. I think that wraps up the questions in the chat. Are there other like live hands? Oh, Kelly.
Sorry, one more. So then would would there be like a subrecipient agreement between the land trust and CCLT?
Yeah,
Okay.
We are working off a model similar to that. So ultimately we will send you a survey, hope that you respond in a pretty quick manner, and then that will serve as like a subrecipient quasi. I don't want to use the word contract, but it could end up looking like that. Yes. John McCall.
Never hurts to ask, how much money are you think you're going to be giving out, and what will the grant range be for different?
Well, we really had a long conversation about this recently because we didn't know if we would hear from 20 land trusts or 100 land trusts. So that's why we limited to ask for your top priority. If we get a $2 million grant, which is the highest amount we could receive, what did we calculate it to be? It was something around, let me do a little quick calculation.
Yeah, I think we're still figuring that out.
Right.
And sorting through like the technical assistance components of it as well. So we have like the direct grants, and then there's also technical assistance to be provided through the program as well. So I know that was one of my first questions though, as well, is
Yeah.
how much money are we talking about?
But remember, we're also working on a block grant through Wildlife Conservation Board, which will be a little bit more focused on getting projects ready for like acquisition. What we want to do is help folks get whatever due diligence you need to do to get projects lined up to go to the board, whatever it takes to get to that point. So that's a chunk of money that doesn't really, I mean, we've been told to aim in the range of like 2.5 million for that as well. But depending on the need for the in the case of WCB will kind of dictate how much we actually ask for, whereas the DOC has that cap. But know that this is just round one of what will be a 2 round, and hopefully more to come in the future of that DOC program. I don't know if you guys are familiar with the Regional Forest and Fire Capacity Program, but that started out as a one-time appropriation, and over the years it's grown into more and more money because the need across the state has been so great for, getting wildfire prevention and forest health projects to implementation. So that's this is kind of in line with what they're doing, what DOC is doing with that RFFC program, but just a little bit more broad so that land trusts really have an opportunity to take advantage of this funding.
I see 2 more questions. Lynn asks, if you receive the SALT capacity funding, does that restrict our eligibility for these funds? I don't think so, but we should double check with DOC. No, I don't think so. I don't
If it's
think
different kind of capacity. So DOC wants to fund through this program capacity that can't be funded through other programs. So they have the regional forest and fire capacity. They have the capacity available through SALT. If you have a hard time fitting into either of those 2 programs, then this 3rd program should be the program that's for you. So this is the stuff that's been the hardest to fund. Let's say this is what they're kind of targeting in terms of capacity.
any follow-up questions on that, Lynn, wherever you are on the screen. I see you trying. Oh, you're good. Okay. Which land trust will receive the survey? That is a good question. Everybody here, so we have a list. If you received an invitation here, you're going to receive the survey, I'd imagine, and it's open to non-members as well. So we need to figure out how to invite non-members to submit. Okay. Kathleen, WCB staff expressed internal financial policy issues related to covering associated project costs. Have you all run into this with a proposal to fund due diligence elements? That's probably a question for you, Bridget.
Sorry, I'm responding to a direct message.
Oh.
Can you repeat it? I'm sorry.
WCB staff expressed internal financial policy issues related to covering associated project costs.
Does that mean that they don't want to fund like an appraisal or certain things? Is that what you're getting at?
I think oh, sorry, go ahead.
That's right. We actually had a endangered species section 6 grant that the federal funders would fund associated costs, but their process for some reason was challenging internally. So I heard from staff that they're trying to get away from any kind of section 6 grant that funds associated costs related to appraisals or due diligence. And so I was wondering if you've run into that in conversations.
No, I think one of the benefits to the funders too is that all gets batched up to run through CCLT and LTA, you know?
Yeah,
So,
so they wouldn't have to deal with it.
right.
Got
Yeah.
it.
And that's one of the reasons that the block grant is compelling to the state funders, is because then, you know, CCLT and LTA are the intermediaries of all these projects and all these quote unquote, you know, smaller grants that are really meaningful for organizations and create so much more impact, but their staff and team doesn't have to interface with the nuances of all of those deliverables, you know?
Any more questions? Can I also say that Bridget or Claire, maybe don't get mad at me, but if you have questions or specific suggestions, send them to the CCLT email address and we can respond to them in case you didn't come up with it now and you've thought further about it. And we'd love to have your really awesome insight. Okay, so on the survey, we, the project team, are working over the next week and a half to wrap it up and get it out to you. And we are really hopeful that you can return it to us by April 7th. And remember, this is going to be a very simple survey. Hopefully it takes you less than 30 minutes to respond to the survey itself. But in the meantime, if you do want to respond, you need to identify what your highest capacity need is for this first opportunity, not the last, just the first, and then start quantifying how much that will cost or what you want to request, remembering that it's over a period of 3 years. You don't have to use it over the whole 3 years. You can use it in 1 year, but you have the option to use it over 3 years. And then take a look at the Natural and Working Lands Climate Smart strategies, and in, you know, like 3 sentences or less, see if you can make the connection between the capacity and how that's going to move you towards one of the, you know, menu of strategies that they have in the document. And in the document, they have actions listed by like sort of habitat types or geographies. So feel free to look sort of specifically within the area you work, or they have a collection of many more actions sort of throughout. So that will be your homework. If you're going to fill out the survey, you can prepare for now. So it only takes you 30 minutes to click the buttons and put it in the Google form.
I wish we could see a show of hands, like right now, like which land trust might even be interested in pursuing one of these capacity grants, but
put a thumbs up or put something in the chat.
Yeah, because it would be nice just to get an indication, like what is the actual interest in, like what John McCall said, $100,000 for like a position or a grant writer, or, you know, that sort of thing that could really help your organization take a step forward.
Okay. Okay, awesome. Good idea, Tasha. I like it.
I just, you know, it's good to know, like right from the get-go, like, is there interest in this? Should CCLT continue to explore these block grants? Of course we should, but.
Okay, I think I talked so fast. I wrapped it up really early. Next time I'll slow down and take a breath.
There's a lot of information. Thank you, Jess. That was really great.
Okay, and then
That's great, Jess.
Oh, thanks. Does everybody have the CCLT email address in case they have brilliant ideas in the middle of the night to add to the shaping of the program or questions?
Yeah, CCLT email in the chat. And so folks can grab it there.
There you go.
This is great. People are already coming up with proposals in the chat. So
cool.
Yeah.
Shelton, I see you. You're ready.
Awesome. Okay, well, I'm happy to hang on here for a little bit and answer questions since we have 22 more minutes until the meeting is officially over.
Or you could let everyone go to dinner early.
Yeah, you can all go to dinner early, but I'll just hang out here.
Yeah, so look for our emails, like those CCLT emails are going to become more and more critical as we're rolling this out. So like, please pay attention to them and open them and follow their directions. And and it's this is going to happen really quickly. So the time frame for turning around the DOC application is pretty rapid. So we do need everybody's support in, jumping in, getting us this information so that we can do our best and work with LTA to put together a program that's really going to serve all of you.
I can't tell if Chris and Vanessa and maybe Marcia had their hands up for questions or something else. Chris,
I think
right?
that they were
still
saying
voting?
that they were interested in some money.
Would anyone like some money? That's the first question. Yes.
Oh, good. Oh, good. Okay. And a sense of humor comes free with the deal.
Yeah.
Okay.
Comedy on the side.
Yeah.
Well, it looks
thank
like
you
we're,
all, yeah.
yeah, a lot of people are interested, so that's great.
Well, feel free to grab dinner early or hang out.
Okay, well, great. Thanks, everyone. Look for our communications. Please look at LTA's position that they're flying and ours that is soon to come as well. We're really looking for some strong applicants for those positions. They're going to be really key. And, the job that those folks are going to do is going to serve so many organizations and really advance conservation across the whole state. So we need great applicants. Please spread the word, and we look forward to working with you on this opportunity.